Welcome to another DragonLance Saga Dungeon Mastering 101 episode. It is Palast New Cult the 5th. My name is Adam, and today I'm continuing the Dragonlance Gaming series all about dungeon mastering. When most people think about being a dungeon master, they imagine rules mastery or monster stat blocks or elaborate world-building binders. But here's the truth. None of those things define what a dungeon master actually does. Dungeon mastering isn't about knowing everything. It's about, and it isn't about control. And it certainly isn't about telling your story. At its core, being a dungeon master is about facilitating a shared experience between very different people and doing it with intention. Welcome to Dungeon Mastering 101. Don't forget to like and subscribe to this channel. Ring the bell. You can support this channel by becoming a patron on Patreon, a member on this YouTube, and you can pick up DragonLance Media using my affiliate link in the description below. All right, so we got a number of segments as per usual to go through, and this is actually returning to one of the first in the Dungeon Mastering 101 series about core foundations, and it's breaking down one of the segments that I had covered in that. So I had mentioned earlier in this series that I'm going to be covering broad range, and then I'm going to be getting into micro specific ranges. That's kind of where we're starting with now. We're getting into the bit more minutia with specifics here. So Corey, how you doing? Thanks for tuning in. Appreciate you. Timothy, what up? You're wondering why none of the Dragonlance villains 1 through 6 are not on Audible or Kindle. Yeah, I don't know. That's a good question. It all comes down to whether Wizards of the Coast think they sold enough to warrant putting together the production and paying for it or not. And if they didn't sell very well, then they probably aren't going to do it. You know, that's really what it comes down to. It's all economics. Okay, so the first segment I want to talk about is the DM, the Dungeon Master, is not the protagonist. The first misconception new Dungeon Masters struggle with is this. I'm responsible for the story. You're not. The Dungeon Master is not the hero. It's not the main character. And the Dungeon Master is not the author or an author of a finished narrative. Your role is to create situations, not outcomes. And that's something you got to get right through your head immediately, because it does, in fact, fly in the face of what you expect a Dungeon Master to be doing. We're telling a story, and we're allowing the players the right to partake in said story. But no, that is the wrong way of looking at it, because then you might as well just write your own story. Players have no agency in that case. You as a Dungeon Master need to facilitate agency and expression. It's not always easy, let me tell you. Jillian, how you doing? Thanks for tuning in, man. All right, so your players will make all of the choices, your players will take all of the risks, and your players will have to then live with the consequences of those choices and risks. You as the Dungeon Master don't have to deal with any of that. You're just setting up situations for them to react to. So you provide the structure that allows those choices to matter, and once you let go of the need to control the story, your games will immediately improve. Now, this is something, again, I continuously struggle with. So I understand why other people would as well. It's a normal thing. Ultimately, when you have, like, what I always like to do is put things down in 3-act structure, as I mentioned before. So when you have this generic idea of 3-act structure and you want to finish a story, whatever that conclusion may be, and it just does not naturally occur because the players want to go off and do other things, it becomes wildly frustrating for you as the Dungeon Master. And what are you supposed to do? You can't force them to get into a line. You have to sort of let them play. But there's this sort of tacit agreement that exists between players and Dungeon Masters. And that is that the Dungeon Master has boundaries that they're willing and comfortable to operate within, and the players should operate within those boundaries, whatever they may be. That's a tacit agreement. Once the players stop operating within those boundaries, well, then there's no reason for the players to continue with the story, and there's certainly no reason for the Dungeon Master to continue with the story. So sometimes you just have to cut your losses. All right. The second segment I wanted to talk about, the 5 core roles of a dungeon master. So we just covered some misconceptions about the dungeon master. Now, what are the actual roles? What does the dungeon master actually do? So a dungeon master wears many hats, but most of what you do falls into 5 core roles. 1, you are the facilitator. You keep the game moving, and this means you have to set the pace, you have to clarify the options if they're obscure, you have to help with transitioning between scenes, and you have to manage spotlight time. Now again, this can be difficult. If players clearly don't want to progress to a different scene, or they certainly don't want you to cut them off and force them to go to a different scene, even if you're very ready, if they're comfortable where they are, you have to make a decision as a dungeon master. Do I try to nudge them along? Do I just sit and wait? Or do I jump into the next scene itself, using non-player characters or using environment to help encourage this outcome? It's something that I struggle with as well. So it is something that you're going to have to develop. And again, you're going to have to develop that trust with your players, that they understand, okay, well, it's clearly a signal. It is time for us to move on. Let's stop doing whatever the hell it is we're doing right now. Now, a facilitator doesn't rush players, but he also doesn't let the momentum die, which is really, really simple to have happen. Your job is to keep the shared experience alive. So regardless of what the players are choosing to do or not choosing to do, that pacing, it's really incumbent upon you. And so you need to encourage them sometimes to keep moving when they're not moving. So you're also, number 2, you are the arbiter. You interpret the rules and you make the calls, not the players, not what the players want it to be, and certainly not what the rules might say that the players are then shoving in your face. You're the dungeon master. You change the rules whenever you want to, whenever it suits the game that you're playing. If the players do not agree with that, they do not have to play in your game. Understand that you should have a general awareness with the players that, look, I'm going to do my best to be consistent and fair in my rulings, and I'm going to lean heavily on this core books. But if for some situation something happens that I just don't agree with the book outcome, I'm going to change it. That's my prerogative. Dungeons & Dragons as a game system has always encouraged the dungeon master to do this, even in some cases to ignore or fudge dice rolls. So you do not have to lock yourself down to what the players want or to what the game system is. What you do have to do is be honest and clear with the players on how you're going to adjudicate your rules, and then be consistent with them. If you are not consistent, then the players have no idea what structure they're supposed to be operating within, and they cannot engage in the story that you're setting up for them to play in. So when you make a ruling, you need to make sure that it's fair and consistent each time. When you keep, part of the arbitration of this is to keep the game moving, so not letting the rules bog down the game session. And then, of course, if you need to revisit a ruling after the fact, then by all means, do so. And I encourage every dungeon master to constantly evaluate the choices that they make after the session is over, and if you have to, eat crow and apologize for the ruling that you made to the player that you made the ruling in, if you determine it to be unfair. You want to build up trust with your players. You don't want to shock them and throw them about the world that you're trying to run them through. It's all about a shared experience and trust, right? So fairness matters more than precision matters, meaning your interpretation of the rules through the fairness of play for all the players is more important than the rules as written. All right, number 3, what the DM does. You're the world's voice. You describe the environment and its reactions, and the world speaks through the weather, the NPC's behavior, the dangers inherent in the world, the opportunities that are offered either through the environment, through monsters, or through NPCs, or the consequences of the actions the players engage in. But you are literally the world that they are in, And so it's really, really important for you to be very clear about what they see, when they see it, who they're talking to, etc. You don't tell players what to think. You tell them what happens when they act. A living world then responds to their actions. So you need to be as malleable as, in some cases, the players need to be. Don't think because you're just the dungeon master that you have to be hard and rigid all the time. You can actually bend, and the players will usually have a lot more fun if you are a little more malleable. All right. But always, always, always be consistent with the world and with your rulings. All right. So the fourth thing that you do, you are the spotlight manager. So you decide who gets attention and when. This is not always easy. Sometimes some players like to be the person in charge, and you have to straight up tell them, hold on a second, and then go to the next person and say, what do you do? You have to understand time in your head. If someone says, hey, I'm going to go searching for, a secret door or something, and everyone else wants to go do stuff, well, that searching is going to take about 10 minutes. So you've got 10 minutes in your head to have everyone else do something. So if everyone else is going and doing things that take less time, so you're spending more time with them, you also have to keep in the back of your head, well, I haven't checked in with this person that's searching, and go, okay, well, you've covered this these different areas in this room, and you haven't found anything else. You continue searching until the end, and you do not find anything. Then jump right back over to everyone else that's still operating within that 10-minute segment of them searching. So you do need to bounce back and forth, but always keep track of time. Time is incredibly important when it comes to the game. You either speed it up so it's not a barrier, or you make it last so that things can actually happen within that framework, right? Don't use our time as a judgment. Use the game time and the character's actions to arbitrate that time. Okay, so the spotlight manager. So this is subtle but critical. You need to invite quieter players into the scenes. Give them an opportunity. They may not want to engage, or they may feel uncomfortable engaging, but at least you stopped and you gave them an option. And then you need to nurture them a little bit, right? If they are a little too timid, or if they're a little standoffish, give them some suggestions. And they don't have to take any of the suggestions, but throwing them out there may actually bring up new ideas for them on their own. Gently limit dominant voices. You don't want to stifle players who are excited to play, but you also don't want them railroading everyone else. So you have to play that delicate balance between shush and please speak louder, And so just have a natural rotation of focus that you regularly go in. Whenever you're doing a public speaking gig, right? One of the first things that college usually teaches you about public speaking is you are making eye contact with different people throughout the course of your speech. That makes people feel meaningful, that makes them feel involved and a part of the dialogue, even if they're not actually speaking. It's as if you are speaking directly to them. That's why I look into the camera when I'm talking, and I don't always just look at my picture. That tells you, as the viewer, that I am engaging with you, that you are the special person that I am talking to. Same thing with public speeches, and certainly the same thing goes for dungeon mastering. You need to make eye contact with your players so that they know who you're talking to and that they feel involved when you're talking to them. And that's why it's important to rotate between who you're looking at between your players. So if you just have to do clockwise or counterclockwise, however you want to do it, find a consistency with it. It'll feel a little awkward if you're not used to it initially, but ultimately it's going to help the game pacing, and it's going to help everyone feel involved throughout the process. All right, the next and last thing that a dungeon master does, you're the tone setter, right? Your energy sets the emotional temperature at the table. So if you're calm, everyone else is probably going to be a little bit more calm. You can't control other people's emotions or how they're reacting to a situation, but you can guide them. And the way your demeanor, the way you put yourself together, the way you communicate, you're actually guiding them to be the same way. So when you're super excited, they tend to get excited. When you're tense and you're filled with anxiety, they're going to be echoing that. It's a natural thing. Human beings can fight it, and then when they acknowledge that it's happening, they can then stop. But it is a natural way that we connect with other human beings, well, every other animal on this planet really, is we just take what they're giving us and we accept it unless we actively reject it. It's how people command rooms. It's how you get swept up in speeches from socio-political leaders. I mean, it's just a really natural way of engaging with someone or something, just feeding off of what they're giving you, right? And you're not always aware of it, but it does actually help. So players take their cues from you more than you realize. Managing your own reactions is one of the most important Dungeon Master skills you'll ever develop. Now, I'm not suggesting anyone would do this, and really most people who've run a game a few times won't. But if you know there's a trap in one specific area, or you know there's a secret door, or you know there's something that the players really, really want that's just right there, sometimes you can get a little excited. You're like, oh, what do you want? Do you want to check the door? Do you want to check for a trap? You know what I mean? You sort of lead them on. Don't ever do that. Your anxiety and excitement will then feed to them, which then makes them go, wait a second, the Dungeon Master's acting weird. How about I search this area real quick? That means they're going to pick off you and make decisions based on your reactions. So if they're walking into an ambush and you're starting to get all your things together and you're picking up your dice ready to roll for surprise, they're going to be like, whoa, whoa, whoa. He's acting all crazy right now. Why is he acting all crazy? How about we just take a second? Let's get a 10-foot pole and put someone's hat on it and just, stretch it out there and see what happens. So they're going to react, and that could then tip them off to dangerous situations or beneficial situations that really you should not be tipping them off to. Let them discover them on their own. It feels so much more meaningful when players discover things than when you lead them to something. All right, so segment number 3. What a Dungeon Master is not. Understanding what you don't do is just as important than understanding what you do. As a Dungeon Master, you are not the adversary to the players. You're not there trying to beat them. You're not trying to kill them. You're not a rules lawyer. Now, this can come in challenging because you are the arbiter of rules. But look, if a player gives you an idea or a request to try something that is against the rules, but the situation makes it really kind of cool, then go with the rule of cool and just let them try it. You don't ever want to stifle imagination in a game, even if the rules seem to be in stark opposition to it. You as the Dungeon Master get to make up the rules. So if it sounds good to you, and if the rulings are, in opposition, screw the rulings. Let the player do it. Let them give it a go. See what happens. If they want to flip off of the side of a wall and land behind someone and stab them in the kidney, well, maybe they wouldn't be able to do that in one action, but it sounds really neat. Let them try it. Have them do a couple rolls and see what happens. And the Dungeon Master's not a novelist. Now, you may be a novelist, but not when you're dungeon mastering. So keep that mindset away, as far away as you could possibly get. Look, you want to tell a fun story, but you're not the only one telling the story. So you need to get your mind around the idea that the players are an integral part, the most important part of the story that you're telling together. So don't have a full novel ready. Always go in with situations and allow the players to play off of those and then have the world react to those. And that is how your story unfolds. Don't ever come into it with a novel. And then you're not the referee trying to win. The Dungeon Master wins by the players having a great time. That's how you win. You don't win by defeating them or forcing them to finish the novel that you had planned them to run through. Like, the whole point is that you're supposed to enjoy the process. If you're not enjoying the process, you probably shouldn't be dungeon mastering that game. Conflict exists within the world already, not between you and the players. So you succeed when the table succeeds. Segment number 4, I want to talk about the hidden skill, which is decision making. Most of what a dungeon master does boils down to making decisions under pressure. And believe you me, dungeon masters are under a lot of pressure. Every moment behind the screen, you have to ask yourself, does this happen? How hard is it? What reacts to that? Who goes next? You're constantly asking yourself questions and then providing answers. And then the questions are coming from the players as well, and you're answering those questions. So you don't need perfect answers. You just have to accept that. You need timely answers. Confidence comes from decisiveness, not encyclopedic knowledge. It is nice and it is helpful to understand the world that you're playing in, or the era of the world you're playing in. I say that specifically for DragonLance. That is very helpful. But this is your story. You're not playing through a novel. The players didn't play this game to play through novels or to play through existing timelines. If they want to deviate, let them deviate. It's really that simple. All right, so number 5. We're almost done here. We got 2 more. Number 5, responsibility without control. Now, here's the balance that every dungeon master has to learn. You're responsible for the fairness, the clarity, the safety, and the momentum of the game. You are not responsible for the player's choices, the player's outcomes, and saving characters from consequences. Any dungeon master out there who says that they do not let their players die in a game is actually harming the players and making it more difficult later on to actually run an impactful game. If there's no danger, there's no point. If your players can't die, then what is the point of the game? It's supposed to be a world on its own that the players are reacting to. Part of that is getting into trouble. Part of that is possibly dying. And the players will never know how far they can go until they get hurt going too far. It's like being a parent. This is not the best analogy, but I'm going to give it anyway. You have to let your kids explore. You have to let them off of a leash. You can't helicopter parent them and expect them to then be fully functioning human adults. They have to fail. They have to make mistakes. That's how they learn what to do and what not to do in a given situation. That's the only way players understand the world that you've built for them and the world and how it's going to react to the choices that they make. You have to have consequences. You have to. All right, so you're not responsible for the player's choices. You're not responsible for the perfect outcomes, and you're not responsible for saving the characters from their own consequences. Great dungeon masters respect player agency, even when it leads somewhere unexpected. So, and it really does come down to that, respect. If the players really want to go and murder someone, understand there's going to be consequences for that, possibly with their alignment, possibly with the organization that they're supposed to be a part of, possibly with the law in the region that they find themselves in, possibly with other NPCs who witness the act and then turn against the player characters, or possible henchmen that witness it and then lose trust in the players. There's always a reaction to every action, and you have to, as the dungeon master, arbitrate that fairly and consistently. All right, the last thing I wanted to talk about here was the human side of the screen. Now, every single one of these players is coming to the table with different motivations for their characters and for themselves, for the game, different comfort levels with the rules, with the other players, with you, with the game itself, and different expectations about what they're going to experience during this game. Your role is not to flatten those differences, but to work within them. It's important for a dungeon master to communicate with your players so that you understand, and this is a perfect session 0 situation, you understand what they want out of the game, what they want out of their characters, and what their characters' motivations are in the world. Dungeon mastering is as much about reading people as it is about running game systems. When you see the players starting to dwindle or starting to lose attention or starting to just not care and just run the character through as if mechanically, it's your job to either respond to them in game, trying to bring them back to some level of excitement and engagement, or pull them aside after the session or during a break and asking them if everything is okay, if they're still invested in the game or not. Sometimes players have to leave games. Sometimes they don't want to tell you that they want to leave the game or they're not having fun because they don't want to hurt your feelings. It's important for you to understand that we're all human adults, and if you're kids playing this game, you all should have a shared respect for each other. And you don't have to play the game. You can pop in and pop out at whatever comfort level the other players in the Dungeon Master have with that activity. But don't ever feel personally hurt if someone decides not to run a game or not to play in a game. Because it's not about you, it's about what they're going through and how they're engaging or having fun with the game. I've had players that I really wish would play the game with me, that they just don't really resonate with my style, or they don't really resonate with the games I'm running, or they don't really resonate with the other players. And that's frustrating for me as a dungeon master because I really like those players. But you can't force someone to play a game they're not into. And they may like you, but they just don't like the scenario that they find themselves in, so they have to leave. You have to be okay with that. It's just a normal process. So when you understand what your role actually is as a dungeon master, I'm sorry, I'm jumping ahead here. Being a dungeon master isn't about mastery, it's about presence. You create all of the structure, you guide all of the momentum, you make all of the fair calls, and you hold the space for creativity. When you understand what your role actually is, all of the pressure sort of drops away. The game just flows naturally, and the experience improves for every single person at the table. This is the foundation, and this is what a dungeon master actually does. And I hope that helps. I know I've reiterated a lot of these points in the past, but again, we're just sort of funneling down to hyper specifics as we're going to continue through this core foundations section until we then move on to the next one. So thank you guys so much for tuning in. That is it for this episode of Dungeon Mastering 101, Core Foundations, what a dungeon master actually does. Do you have any tips or tricks based on your personal experience as a dungeon master or player that you'd like to share in chat or in the comments below? I'd love to see them, and I'm sure other players would as well, and other dungeon masters as well. Was I off base on any of my suggestions? I'm 100% open to that. Please give me a little bit of feedback here and let me know if I'm spinning my wheels or not. Feel free to email me at info@dlsaga.com or leave a comment below. This channel's, first of all, thank you for tuning in. Don't forget to like and subscribe, ring the bell, and click the like button. It all goes to help other Dragonlance fans learn about this channel and its content. And if you do appreciate the content that I'm putting out there, consider joining me on Patreon or maybe becoming a YouTube member. It always helps, and I really do appreciate any support. This channel is all about celebrating the wonderful world of the DragonLance Saga, and I hope you'll join in that celebration. Thank you for watching. This has been Adam with DragonLance Saga, and until next time, Slanjavar.